that's yet to play out, because that's really not going to start. It's maybe starting in Marco Island right now, but it's going to not start out where we have good measurements of it here for another hour or two. But on the southeast coast, the storm surge forecast worked out very, very well, and it just goes to show you that the science of this is very advanced. We know that if the storm does a certain thing, that this is what the storm surge is going to do. We're looking at pictures right now of one of the construction cranes in Miami that buckled, and it doesn't look like it fell off the roof, but certainly a scary moment there. They have about 24 cranes there, maybe a few more than that, on buildings under construction. And buildings in Miami extend over 800 feet into the sky, so the winds were terrifically stronger. That 130-some-mile-an-hour gust at Jackson Hospital was several stories up. I don't know if it was 10 or 12 stories up. Imagine, oh, there's the drone. Look at the drone above Jim Cantori's location there in Estero. But I was saying, Jim, that up on those high-rises, you know, this was a big test of the Miami building code with these high-rises. And we're going to be fascinated to see what you see in the drone there, and see how things went.
Come with me. Hey, Brian. Watch the cord. Watch the cord. Brian, come here. Shoot his monitor. Shoot his monitor. I want to show you what we're seeing on the drone, if that's possible. Wipe the lens off. Okay, this is maybe
Jim,
a quick
20
look
seconds here, but real quick.
at what's going on. Yeah. So here you go. Here's what we're looking at. I can't see much damage at all here in terms of any roof damage, which is great news. Looking at the parking lot. Looking at the top of our hotel here. I think all in all, this looks pretty good, at least at first look, at first glance.
All right, back to our continuing coverage of Hurricane Irma here on the Weather Channel. We have tornado warnings in central Florida we want to tell you about, and we'll get back to Jim Cantori right after that. They're in the Orlando area. There's two of them kind of bracketing Orlando. Right there you see them as part of these very strong bands coming in off the Atlantic, rotating around. And the first one, that's Orange County and Seminole County. This one down here is heading in the general direction of the entertainment district down I-4 here. As a matter of fact, here's 192, and so as it gets to I-4, and Disney World is right in there. So when we look at the shear tracks here, where we can kind of track where the wind was rotating, here you see it heading very much in the direction of Disney World. Now it looks like it's either dissipated or it's just not being detected by the radar, because the radar is over in Melbourne, so it may just be too low. But these things generally don't last terribly long. The point is that in the Orlando area, and the other one was right up here north of downtown, more up toward Winter Park and heading across I-4. But the point is that this is going to continue, and this is going to continue on the eastern half of the state, even into central Florida. So just another hazard coming here with Hurricane Irma. All right, Jim Cantori is in Estero, Florida, and when we last saw him, he was trying to get us drone pictures. Well, all right, we don't have Jim for a moment. So let's just take an overall look here at the storm and where it is. So there you see it in the Fort Myers area, and just to kind of get close in here, you see if you have friends in Lehigh Acres, boy, that's where the worst of what they're getting right now, which is sustained winds in the 100 to 110 mile an hour, maybe gusting to 120 or 130 mile an hour, something like that, in Lehigh Acres over toward Immokalee. All right, Jim Cantori with the drone in Estero, which is just down to the south of Fort Myers.
Wait on Friday night for that thing up, but looks like it's going to be good. It's right around that sun.
Yeah, Estero is where we are at the present time, Brian. And again, you know, we're in the eye. We're in what's left of the eye. It's not what we call a clean eye, because as you saw from the phenomenal pictures from our heroes called the Hurricane Hunters, where they had the moon in one of the shots and the eye wall, and they had, of course, the sun glint coming in with the eye wall. That's a clean eye. Okay, there's a distinct cut right there. This has gotten filled in because we've been talking about for the last several hours how it's broken down. All right, the eye has broken down in through here. And as far as we can see here, you can see the kind of damage that we had. Very minimal, at least right where we are. We got the drone up for a second before, and you can see from that shot where we zoomed in to what they were looking at with the drone camera, you know, the roofs look pretty good, really good actually. And I'm just looking here at the Residence Inn. I don't see any tiles missing at all from what I can see here, but of course it would take further examination once this is it. We gusted to probably about 90 here. We gusted to about 90. We had sustained winds, very strong tropical storm force and hurricane force for a while once we dealt with that northern eye wall. So this is the kind of stuff we're looking at through here. Everybody's car looks pretty good. This is the calm. We're going to get the back side of this though, Brian. And so, you know, a lot of people are actually out there walking. This is a good time to walk the dog, you know, because we got dogs and pets in our hotel here. So a lot of people are out walking the poochies. What are we going to get on the back side of this thing? And how long before I can need to tell everybody? I see some pretty darkening skies looking off to my west here a little bit. What do we got?
Well, it's just part of this messy eye, Jim. It's really not anything pronounced, although that western eye wall that does not have is not enhanced. We call it enhanced on the radar when it has the oranges and the reds. The part that was not enhanced had the 89 mile an hour gust. So it's not nothing right outside of that. We can just say with some confidence that where it's enhanced, and that's going to be off to your west, because you're in the middle of this big broad eye that last I saw the measurement was 25 or 30 miles. So it's it's going to take a while for that to happen. My sense is, Jim, you're at about 9 o'clock if it were a clock, you're about 9 o'clock. So what wind you have, does it seem to be coming from the north? All right, well, we've lost Jim's ability to hear us at the moment. We can see him, but he can't hear us.
We just had a 79 mile per hour wind gust was just reported at Orlando Jetport.
All right,
so I'm not sure if that's associated with the tornado warning.
Orlando Jetport there on the south side of Orlando. So that would be associated with those bands we were talking about just a moment ago up there in the Orlando area. Oh, Jim Cantore, are you back with us?
Yes, I got you again.
All right.
I'm going to stay near the hotel here too, guys. Go ahead,
I
Brian.
was just asking, Jim, what's your wind direction there?
Well, it's kind of erratic, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
But actually, the best way to look at this is to go up a little bit, Brian. So let's show you the clouds, and let's see, northeast going north, maybe a little bit. I don't know, maybe a little bit northerly. Looks northerly.
Yeah, I was saying that you're about 9 o'clock. That's my guess. You're inside the eye, though, in that messy eye, so it can be erratic in there. It's not clean by any means.
It's definitely not clean, but it is given, especially people with pets, and there are many of them, and actually even people that have been really cooped up since last night and a good part of today, just kind of watching this whole thing go down. We lost power probably, what would you say, guys, maybe 5 hours ago at this point, 5-6 hours ago, something like that. So it's given at 1:45. Okay, so we lost power at 1:45. I don't even know what time it is right now, 7:40. But either way, it's been a while. People, when you get cooped up, you want to get out, stretch your legs a little bit. At least being in this eye, dirty or not, is giving people a chance to get out and at least walk the dog. But I think from what we started with this morning, Brian, and what we saw coming through the Keys, from what I see around here and what I just got a first quick glimpse at from the drone, I'm pretty pleased. We'll get on the back side of this, even though it won't be, as Brian was telling us, as bad. But you can see as Safer looks up at the sky here. Matt, go ahead and just pan up and just kind of hold on those clouds. You can see how rapidly they're moving. This whole eye is kind of collapsed and filled in. It's what we call a dirty eye. And it has not stopped raining. It's not one of those kind of eyes where we've even gotten a break at all from the rain. So this is what we're looking at through here. But what just wild. Again, like I told you guys earlier, this is my 92nd or 93rd, I've lost count, tropical entity that I covered on the Weather Channel in about 25 years. And every doggone one of these things never ceases to amaze me. So this one going from light to dark, maybe dealing with what was the old outer eye wall before we got into this inner one. Pretty incredible with Mother Nature here. What I'm happy about is, if you remember hearing from the governor earlier on, he was very genuinely concerned about so many people. And this certainly here anyway, from what this little sampling that I have for you is nothing like what we could have had, and certainly nothing like what they dealt with in the Keys. But I don't want to sugarcoat it because there's a lot of work to be done. Brian explained what was happening in Miami. They got it worse certainly than we did right here, and you add surge into that component, and that makes it a lot worse too. We had a crane collapse. We had certainly issues in the Keys where I was talking to Bill South from the National Weather Service in Key West. He was talking about how US 1 was covered with water. So where Jim is in this little part of the world is just a small sampling of certainly what happened. And our hearts, guys, still going out to Harvey victims, still going out to what happened with Irma in the Northern Leewards, in the U.S. and British Virgin Islands, in the Turks and Caicos, in the Bahamas, in Cuba, which, thank goodness, Brian, Cuba took one for us here. Because I think that interaction really started the whole weakening process, and then it really never got a chance to recover, even though it was over those very, very warm waters of the Straits as it made its way up to the Keys.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. The interaction with Cuba, the delay, whatever it was that delayed the track, I mean, only a matter of 6 or 12 hours, really. Not a big delay, but a delay. And then that changed the timing of the dry air coming in and eroding the backside. Jim, I think what's going to happen here is you're going to get rain off and on. It's going to kind of quit. And then you're going to get the bottom end of the eye wall. The winds are going to change around. And then the rain is going to stop. Most of your west wind for a good while is going to be in dry air. We really, the atmosphere has dried out on the south side of this. And you said it exactly right, that, the way this has evolved on Southwest Florida, may turn out to be a best case. But I hasten to add that I can't imagine that 142 mile an hour wind gusts went through Naples and we didn't have things fail in that kind of wind.
That's not going to be good.
But you never know when you get a gust measurement whether it's widespread or whether it's local, right? You just don't know that until after the fact. So I know we don't want to draw any conclusions yet, right? But anyway, we do know though that it could have been a lot worse. There's no question about it.
Yeah, absolutely. That was only my small little point there that I wanted to make. The other thing, too, is we still got a ways to go with this. What moved through us and what you saw me go through, I don't know, 45 minutes to an hour ago, still has to come up through western Florida, possibly through the middle part of the state. And it's going to take a while still, Brian, and you can brief us on this, what you're seeing with what's left over of this eye wall. Is it still eroding away, or is it holding together pretty well? Because it's a pretty mighty eye wall, even as the winds we saw move through here.
Yeah, I'm very really fearful for those eastern suburbs of Fort Myers, Lehigh Acres and over that way. And also, Jim, I don't know if you heard me a moment ago or heard Sarah. The wind gust was, what was it, Sarah, in Orlando?
79.
79 in Orlando. And we know that the gusts were over 130 in Miami. So, I mean, this is a vast circulation that's going to do damage all across the state. So, there's a long way to go, is your point. Yes.
Right, exactly. That's my point. And one of those areas that has not dealt with the worst of this, perhaps, is Bradenton, and that's where we find Stephanie Abrams. So, Steph, I talked to you maybe an hour ago. We had some comm issues, obviously. Tell us how things have changed in Bradenton over the last hour.
I would say they've actually been pretty consistent, Jim. We're kind of in this big shield north of that center of circulation. I'm going to start calling it that because it doesn't look very much like an eye anymore, right? It's like a center of circulation at this point. And so we've just had this consistent wind, and I believe that this is what we are going to see for the extended period. We are now up 5 floors. We were having some, water and technical issues not combining down right by the Manatee River. But now you can get a bird's eye view of what it looks like and what the winds look like. But it has been consistent, Jim, and I think we need to now advance this story northbound and talk about what people are going to see, because I think they're watching you and Bettis, and I don't want people to be fearful that they are going to see the same effects necessarily as that you and Mike Bettis saw earlier with the system, because the eye is starting to fall apart and it's not as strong. Okay, so maybe we can talk about it with Brian Norcross in studio. Apparently, we've lost Cantori there for a second. Welcome to live TV during hurricane coverage. Let's maybe, as Brian Norcross in studio, and can talk more about that.
Yes, what's really interesting, Stephanie, I'm just looking carefully at the radar. The eye continues to lean east, and anybody that knows anything about Southwest Florida, they know all about eyes that kind of lean to the east side of the cone. Remember Hurricane Charlie in 2004. Now, this is an entirely different situation, but it continues. The center of that circulation, that center of circulation, as you call it, Stephanie, correctly, is getting farther and farther from the west coast. And so on this path, it's going to end up well inland, closer to the center. And that fragment of the eye wall, that half moon there with the strongest winds related to the eye, is moving in that direction, and that's hanging together pretty well, Stephanie. So where you are in Bradenton, I can move the radar up to Bradenton, and we can show you. I was just looking at that. Yeah. You're right on the edge of on the radar, how we have the colors. You're right there on the Manatee River. There I have Bradenton in the middle of the screen now. And so you're right on the edge of the enhanced rain. So Stephanie is right here.
So let's talk about exactly what this means, Brian. As this eye wall is farther inland, what that means for it falling apart and how quickly it's going to do that. And then just our forecast as we go for Orlando, Clearwater, Tampa, Gainesville, Florida, Tallahassee, because those people are now awaiting the arrival of this system. Rainfall is going to be a big issue, maybe 8 to 12 inches, but let's talk about those winds. You think Category 1 winds as we get Central Florida northbound, perhaps?
Well, we're already getting Category 1 winds all up the East Coast and in Orlando. In actual fact, from a weather standpoint, where you are is probably the best weather, well, maybe a little bit north. We have 61-mile-an-hour gusts with this band coming toward you in Sarasota. So it's just down the road.
Yeah.
So, it's coming. It's not going to be the Category 3 storm that we thought. But I don't know if you were able to hear when we were talking, Jim and I were talking earlier, in Miami, there are a lot of sustained winds over 100 and gusts to 130, 100 miles from the center of circulation. So that's just a testament to the spread of energy here that's moving up the state. And all of the tornadoes that we've had have all been, near the East Coast to Central Florida. so just east of you. So as the thing moves north and the geometry kind of changes, we'll see.
Yeah. So let's talk to Jim now, because Jim, you know, where you're positioned, we're right on a body of water. And so we get, you know, less friction coming off this water. If you just go on the other side of the building where there's a little protection and a little more friction, that changes things. And that's really important here. You know, where Bettis was, this thing was just blasting right off the water, and now it's going to be an inland storm. So that makes things a little different with the wind speeds.
It does, and like we were talking earlier, Steph, the fact that if you go up, you know, in the northern part of Florida and into southern Georgia, it's a whole different tree species there. Trees that don't like to be blown around like palm trees and can sway in the wind like that. So that's a whole different story. Hey, I want to show you guys, and neighbors, I don't know if you can see this, but the only way, I think this is nothing short of miraculous. The only way we could have gone live in that eye wall is because of the internet here at the Marriott Courtyard, okay? So the generator essentially is powering their main internet. So we got our fuel and our generators right in through here. We've actually had to switch back and forth with the fuel. We got a fuel truck, we go get the fuel, we keep fueling the generators, all right? And check this out, all right? I'm gonna go inside because this looks like something you'd see at a science project here. You know, we got all these boxes in through here. Sorry, Safe. It's right over on this table. Essentially, we're using that power, okay, to use the courtyard's main internet. And that's the only...
Flooding has just gone...
Okay, audio and visual. And it's because of these guys running...
Hey, Amanda.
So we had to take that's the booster, okay? And essentially attach all of that to this back room.
Hey,
Come
Amanda.
look at this. This is unbelievable. This is it. This is the whole reason why we got to bring you guys coverage in that eye wall. And it's because of technology. We hooked up to the main internet here at the Courtyard at Marriott. They were nice enough to let us do that. We got wires and cables everywhere. But the other thing that we did as a result of that, and I don't know if it was a trade or not, but I'm going to try and keep us from walking on these cables, is that we are not only going to use from their internet, but also taking that power and powering up the Local Now, our Local Now app, so people could watch what is going on with the storm. So they watched all of what Bettis went through with the eye wall. You can see us right now. You can see me over there pointing to it. Obviously, there's a little bit of a delay, but that is the Local Now app that you're seeing on TV, so people here at our hotel can watch it. So it was obviously a little delay, right? Because I'm talking to you now here, and this is when I was in the other room. So you'll see this all come out there. So really, really awesome, and I cannot thank the folks here at the Courtyard enough. We let people go through it, and there's something about when you're watching it, right? You can kind of see everything go down. People have left their homes. They want to know just how strong that wind got, just how bad it was, and to be able certainly to see it and to have this wonderful app, speaks volumes. But it's really the Courtyard at Marriott that allowed this to happen. So some great stuff here, guys. We're back outside now, getting a little bit of a little bit more wind now, but our wind is changing direction. It's starting to come around a little bit now from the northwest. It looks like, Brian Norcross or Stephanie, and we've got certainly a chance to get into some gusty winds here and another round of some heavy rain. The south side looks a little bit drier, but I do think the rain is going to pick up. All right, Steph, back up to you, Bradenton.
Yeah, Jim. Awesome technology. Actually, I did a Facebook Live showing how, we use the same system as you and then also a big satellite truck. But I really want to forward this story because we have a lot of worried Floridians now. We're talking about the central half of Florida, northbound. And Brian, not only into Florida, but also Georgia, South Carolina, with the onshore push of water. I had someone say that they had a friend ask them, they live in Atlanta, should they evacuate? Absolutely not. We do have tropical storm warnings there. And you are going to see some winds. We could have power outages, trees down. Schools are being closed Monday and Tuesday, depending on the county, so you might want to look into that. But, Brian, we still have a hurricane in the center of Florida and an onshore push hundreds of miles away in Georgia and South Carolina. Have you started to see their gauges go up with the water rise?
Yeah, in South Carolina, the gauges are going up in the Battery in Charleston, Stephanie, and also 50-mile-an-hour winds reported just offshore at Beaufort, South Carolina. So it's all, the wind field is monstrous here. And as we were talking about a moment ago, winds, Category 1 winds there all over central Florida. And not to mention the tornadoes. So multiple threats, and they're just moving north and spreading out.
So let's talk about those threats, because a lot of people hear Category 1 and they might not know, okay, does that mean my roof's going to go off with a Category 1? Does it have to be stronger? You know, with Category 1, let's talk some details about the trees that could come down. That's really one of the biggest threats. Power lines coming down, you know, not the type of damage where your roof's going to get ripped off.
And unless you have a roof problem, you know, in Hurricane Wilma in 2005 in South Florida, where houses are built pretty well, we had a tremendous amount of roof damage, and some of it in Category 1 storms, but the roofs were not up to the modern standard. You know, they had been there for a while, things had gotten a little bit weaker, and so forth. So you can get structural damage in Category 1, but we shouldn't get it. But you're right, though, that the widespread threat is from tree limbs coming down. Now, one of the most important things that people can do to make their post-storm situation better in this kind of a situation is to think really hard about where they park their car. You know, don't park it under a tree. Try and park it where, if you can kind of figure out which direction the wind is going to be blowing from, where it's blocked from the wind. If you can put it in a parking garage or in a garage of some kind, great. Because how much better is your post-storm situation if you have a car, as opposed to having a tree smash it or something like that.
Okay, so a lot of people wanted to park their cars up from the water, and now that the center of circulation is eastbound, first of all, what are you seeing with the trend in that center of circulation staying on land, and then how does that translate to the water? I mean, we haven't seen really a water rise here at all, and I would expect maybe a little on the backside of this, because even though that center is in the center of the state, you still have the whole circulation around this system.
Yeah, we're not used to really systems being this big. You know, we've seen a number, even Harvey was a good-sized hurricane, but it wasn't anywhere near this size. So it's just going to take a while for the wind to switch. You know, where you are, it's still pushing the water out. Last time I checked, we'll have to check up there again, the water was 4 feet below normal up where you are. But at Naples, it's 4 feet above high tide, so 4 feet above normally dry ground right at the beach there in Naples. Now, if it doesn't go, the thing is the real push of west wind hasn't even happened yet. So we're just too early to really know, even with this general weakening of the system from going inland, what's going to happen. And, you know, we don't think it's going to be the 15 feet, but this is extraordinarily vulnerable here. If you think about it, Steph, when it took a light wind, a relatively light wind to push all that water out, this is still going to come back in with a much stronger wind, right? So it's going to have a push behind it, and it's already 4 feet above high tide.
So what is the trend for that center of circulation? Because we're still going to have the strongest winds for a while, really right around that center of circulation. You know, where is that? Where do you see that headed? North? Is there a little northeast trend to it? Northwest trend?
Yeah, it's just east of north. I mean, where it's going right now, it looks like it's going like LaBelle is a town that's northeast of Fort Myers, going to get it, and Sebring, which is you know, well inland, almost due east of Sarasota, is going to get it. And if this continues, and it continues to lean east like that, we're talking about getting up toward the Orlando area, and this will be reminiscent of Hurricane Harvey, Charlie, that did tremendous damage around the Orlando area, fundamentally because Orlando has all these grand big trees, and not to mention, you know, a lot of folks in Central Florida live in mobile homes, and you know, it's just not designed really for hurricanes because they're so far inland. So many things can go wrong, and the further inland you go, if you take a hurricane, just because you don't have the infrastructure set up and the strength of the structure set up to deal with that.
Let's talk about rainfall, because I do think that seeing Harvey had a lot of people on edge and really, you know, propelled a lot of people to prepare. Completely different storms. 100%. A lot of people said, I don't want my house to end up like, you know, the people in Houston with Harvey and the rainfall. Though the forecast right now is 8 to 12 inches of rain. Let's talk a little bit about, you know, where we're going to see those max rainfalls. And also in Florida, how it's much different than what we saw in Texas. Harvey sat there, rained in Houston for 5 straight days where I was located. This is going to be today and out.
Yeah, so there are 4 feet of rain in Texas, and as you point out, it's exactly right. In Florida, most of the soil in Florida, especially the southern part of the state, has a sandy limestone base. So water has to do one of 2 things: run off or soak in. The problem in Houston is it can't soak in, so it can only run off, which is a big difference with Florida. Now, if we get 8 to 12 inches of rain in some areas, and it's looking like now that it's going to be Central and North Florida is the most likely to get that, because now we're pretty much done with the rain. Well, I hate to say done, because there is a tail on this, and if the tail ends up coming over South Florida, which it's not impossible, Southeast Florida, it's missing it offshore right now. It's not impossible that we get one of those tails set up where one cell ends up after the other. But generally speaking, Central and North Florida is going to be the focus of the rain, moving up into Georgia and South Carolina and Alabama. So this is this is a threat. This is definitely a threat, because you get into different kind of terrain, hillier terrain, more prone to flash flooding when you get into that different situation we have up in North Florida.
Brian, we've been talking a lot about the radar. I just real quick wanted to ask you about that dry air on the west side of it, and how much is going to get pulled in to this system and how that's going to affect it. Because, even my crew said, well, Abrams, as it goes up, is it still going to be able to tap into some of that moisture? Is it going to strengthen? This is going to continue to lose wind speed. It's going to continue to downgrade, due in part to the land, and also that dry air getting in on the west side, not helping it at all either.
Yeah, I think both of those things are going to happen. The other thing that this dry air, it's not that the storm surge threat will be done, because they're still going to get those west winds pushing the Gulf in, but the rain is going to stop. So there's going to be an opportunity when it is safe, when the wind comes down enough, to go ahead and take care of what they need to take care of, and look and see what exactly has happened.
All right, Brian, thanks for that. Let's now go back to Jim. And Jim, I think that might be a little deceiving for some people, because the rain stops, but you're still going to get maybe a little bit of a push of water there, an onshore flow. So you have to keep that in mind as well.
Yeah, Steph, I'm glad you brought that up, because our winds have come around now, north? Yeah, so our winds have come around from the northwest now, all right? So that means in the westerly direction, that is bringing the water back up into parts of Lee County. And this is why we asked everybody to evacuate. Yeah. Granted, they're not as strong, and we're probably not going to get as high a surge, which is great news, trust me, but this is bringing the water back in. And Brian's been looking at the gauge at Naples. We had at least 4 foot there. I'm not sure where the next gauge is. I don't know if, gosh, I'm trying to think what would be, but I know there are other gauges, obviously, as you go up through Sanibel and certainly up through Charlotte County as well. I know Port Charlotte, Punta Gorda, those areas. But we're going to see those gauges come up as the winds start to come around a little bit more toward the northwest. So, guys, before we were watching wind come this way, all right, and now we're literally watching it almost in the complete opposite direction, because we've gotten on the other side of this. I still don't think we're completely out of the eye wall, all right? But now we're seeing the winds again come in out of a complete opposite direction. And they've gotten gusty again, which is why I put this helmet on as opposed to the other one, because I'll show you why. You see that? That's why I put a helmet on, just so we don't get a cut in the top of the head. It's really that simple, and that's kind of where I stand. But anyway, guys, what's good about this is we have vehicles that have gone and done very, very well with the storm. We have, landscape trees like this. And this thing didn't come down, by the way, in the height of it. It came down even before that, when it was really raining hard, and we got a little bit of a push over there. Looks like a pretty shallow root system. This was a newly planted tree in through here. Looks like some kind of water oak, some kind of small oak at that. But either way, again, I think we fared pretty well through here. But again, this is just a small sampling of an area as we watch this thing start to collapse. Steph has been talking about it. We've heard Brian talk about it, how as this thing comes up through the central part of the state, we still have a very intact eastern eye wall. And what's going to be really interesting is to see the difference in what happened in western Lee County near the water versus eastern Lee County with the wind. Because we know we had stronger winds in the eastern part of Lee County, all right? And that's what that eastern eye wall, and that's what's pushing up towards Stephanie and Chris and eventually up toward Reynolds. But Reynolds getting the wind off the water on the east side. We had flooding in Jacksonville. I saw some flooding in Charleston. I'm not sure exactly what that was from, but I think it was the push of water on shore. Certainly, it could have been a tidal issue there. I'm not sure, but I did see it come across Twitter before we lost power in through here. But again, guys, without the internet here at the Courtyard Marriott, we would not have been live. Because we have lost power here for the last 5 hours or so, and because we powered it, we got to bring you the shots. And without the work of Jim Thomas and Trey Howell and all these guys getting this stuff together.
So please be safe. I'm watching you. I'm watching your stance change. I'm hearing those winds coming in. Things are absolutely going to be picking up and likely worsening in the next couple of minutes.
Right now, getting into this eye wall, and this eye wall is very, very serious. This is the meat of it right here, folks. This is the eye wall of Irma. No doubt about it. Wow.
Yeah, Mike, this is unreal. Watching this unfold in real time. I'm seeing the images on the screen. I'm looking down at my radar, and I'm seeing that northern eye wall move right over you. It's unbelievable. I'm seeing debris flying in behind you off in the distance.
Give me an estimation on when we might get out of this eye wall in Naples and maybe in some calmer winds?
Yeah, thank you. Yes, great question, Mike. I was literally going to say you are about 10 miles from clear sky. That eye is moving on very quickly. Give it 15, 20 minutes, and you are likely looking at clear skies in Naples.
There are moments you stand in those winds, it truly will take your breath away. But now being absolutely hammered by this eye wall with a rain that is incredibly intense, with a wind that's equaling it.
Hey, Mike, I'm looking at the latest scan here, and it looks like things might be starting to clear out. Viewers at home, if you're watching, Mike is bracing literally. These strong winds are not letting up. This eye wall is literally right over Naples. Mike, hang in there. You are almost there. We're seeing it clear out.
I'm with Doc. I'm with you, man. I'm doing my best. This truly is exhausting.
And we still have 2/3 of the state that needs to feel the wrath of Hurricane Irma. That was Mike Bettis earlier today when he went through the eye wall. The eye wall is the strongest part of a hurricane, and it was a tremendous effort even for him to just keep standing. Now it was a Category 3 when it was coming in towards Marco Island, and now down to a Category 2. So let's talk about what this means now for the other 2/3 of the state of Florida. There's a lot of concerned citizens out there. I want to bring in Brian Norcross, one of our hurricane experts, to talk more about that. And Brian, we still have power here in Bradenton. We're on the Manatee River, just to give everyone a reset of where we're located. So I'm able to see Twitter. I'm able to see Facebook. I'm able to see all the social media, Instagram. And people are asking, okay, well, if this goes right up through Orlando and Gainesville, what does that mean? You know, I live in a trailer park. Will winds of this power cause damage? Yes, mobile homes can be significantly damaged by a Category 1 hurricane.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And Stephanie, this is going to be an unusual storm, as we've seen so often. Every storm is different, right? At Fort Pierce, which is obviously over on the east coast of the state, way over 125 or 30, 40 miles from the hurricane, gusting to 89. At Southwest Regional International Airport there, not too far from Estero, it's gusting to 89. The gusts were the same. So the energy in this system has just so spread out that, you know, generally we concentrate on that eye wall, and we should concentrate on what's left of it. But I really think that the effect of the eye wall is going to be a lesser fraction of the overall damage than we would normally have in a hurricane.
And, you know, and of course, it's the peak of hurricane season. This date is known as the peak of hurricane season while this is making landfall. With the wind spreading out, how far out do these winds expand? You know, I had a question about someone in Tallahassee, and as this moves towards the Atlanta area, I mean, how far in advance are we going to feel these winds? And what are they going to be? Tropical storm force, hurricane force? Yeah,
well, so close to the coast, South Carolina, Georgia, North Florida, they not only are they getting the wind because they're getting what we call convection. They're getting the thunderstorms, right? So they're tapping into the wind that's aloft there, and up in south of Brunswick, right on the coast of Georgia, they have a flash flood warning out because they're having such a downpour. So there, the winds are already up, and they're already in the tropical storm force there at the Gulf. So this is going to reach Atlanta tomorrow already. The storm is way down in South Florida, but the winds are going to be picking up in Atlanta tomorrow. So Tallahassee, I think that people in Tallahassee need to think about Hurricane Hermine last year and remember what that was like, and think that this probably will be that at a minimum. You know, sometimes comparing to a past hurricane is the best thing that we can do. Steph, you still there?
And, you know, I've had the question before. Yeah, I am. I just heard something. Sorry, Brian. So I just wanted to check to make sure nothing was flying around. I kind of heard something a little noisy. I don't know if you can pick that up on my microphone.
Yeah,
but anyhow,
I can hear it, yeah.
You know, okay, I just wasn't sure what that was. So we'll keep an eye out for that. We're on the 5th floor here of a hotel right on the Manatee River. You know, the winds, it's going to, even tomorrow morning in 24 hours, Hurricane Center is forcing the winds to be down to 65 miles an hour. Right now, they're at about 110. That was the last update I saw. People have asked me in the past, how does it not just fall apart right when it hits the land? You know, you would think, okay, well, it's out of its water source. It should just crumble completely.
Well, okay, so you have a couple of things going on. One is that the circulation is so big. It's so tremendously big that it still is tapping into energy from the Gulf on one side and the Atlantic on the other side. The smaller storms are, generally they do tend to wind down and spread out when they get to land. But the other thing is that it has so much momentum. There's just, the air is going, you know, and so, yes, the friction of the land tends to slow it down. And when we talk about storms, we talk about the strongest wind anywhere in the storm, which is normally in the eye wall. But in this case, you have hundreds and hundreds of miles of spinning air. Right. And just like anything else that's spinning, if you spin a top, you know, and once you quit spinning it manually, it keeps spinning until the friction eventually slows it down. So, you know, that's what's got to happen. And not to mention that it does still have some source of energy. And we can see these ultra strong cells rotating into central Florida now. It looks like into the Space Coast and across over toward Orlando.
Okay, so now we're seeing also, it's kind of riding up I-75 practically at this time.
Yeah, east of 75,
and the
actually.
backside of it has, yeah, a little east of 75. The back of it really eroded away, which, you know, is giving us some clearing there. Some dry air is getting into it. And I'm really concerned about what this means for surge for people, because now we're going into nighttime, Brian, and people might say, oh, you know, it's starting to calm down. I really don't have to worry about it. But this is when the water is going to rise up, because we're getting that more of a west wind. And by the way, for everyone listening, a west wind means the wind goes from the west to the east. Whatever the wind name is, that's the direction it's coming from. So, Brian, it's a little tricky there if you don't know what technically the wind means.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Stephanie. And now you make a really good point. And this is a danger at the coast, all the way from Marco Island, all the way up even to Tampa Bay, because the water has been so low. And it's so fascinating that it was so low. Well, in Naples, it's come up 4 feet. Now, thankfully, the tide is going down a little bit, but the wind is just now switching around to get that westward push. So it's only just beginning to get the push of the wind having the tide come in. Just now. And if that's going to move up, in fact, it's probably going to be overnight in the Tampa Bay area when the tide comes in such that it comes in. And, of course, obviously, you can't see anything when you look out in the water. So the combination of the return, which now is at 4 feet. Right. And by the way, Steph, at the Caloosahatchee River, you know, the river that goes through Fort Myers, last time we checked just a few minutes ago, it was 4 feet down still. So 4 feet below normal. So that water is going to come in a rush just because it's piled up offshore. It's going to replace, and then it's going to get the push all at the same time. So that's an extremely flood-prone area near the Caloosahatchee, and that is all yet to happen, and it's going to happen in the dark of night because we don't have power in a lot of the city, right?
That's what I thought too. So someone who can talk to this is Chris Bruin, who is just over the water from me in the Tampa Bay area. And Chris, you know, I wrote down our high tides and low tides. Our next high tide is at 4:08 in the morning. Sunrise is at 7:13. So it's going to be happening when it's dark here and also in Tampa. You witnessed that outpush of water. There was a lot of people that were out there. I know Manatee were stuck. I've never seen anything like this. Where exactly are you located in Tampa? And what more can you tell us about your experience seeing this and what actually happened and maybe what people were talking about?
Hey, Stephanie. Well, first off, I want to answer all your questions, and we are here near the airport. So we're at the Hilton Hotel. It's about a 12-story building. Right now we're getting those offshore winds, so we are protected from the building. I want to answer everyone's question. Well, of course, our safety is just as important. We don't just get out in the middle of it. The whole team behind us here at the Weather Channel is keeping safety priority. So as the winds shift, we are going to get to safe output on the other side of the building as well. But we are here near the airport, and we're about 20 feet or so above the ground. So we're not worried about storm surge, at least at our location. But as you mentioned, I was at Tampa Bay several hours ago, and boy, oh boy, was it a scene? I mean, it was something out of, you see out of the movies. I mean, otherworldly, just incredible. There were hundreds of people. Now, most of them were residents nearby from the condos, but everyone was walking out. Now, not advised. Again, don't walk out. But while the weather was quiet, a lot of people were snapping pictures. Even local law enforcement was just amazed. I don't think anyone in their lifetime has ever seen anything like Tampa Bay being drained out. And I mean, it went out several hundred feet, the water. And just yesterday I was there. I mean, it was choppy, it was deep, and the water was splashing up on the promenade there on Bayshore Boulevard. Today, there was pretty much empty and free of water. As you mentioned, there was a manatee that got beached in Tampa Bay, and I didn't see that, but again, several animals getting beached up and down the coast. This is a scene that we saw in Naples at the pier, at Fort Myers Beach at the pier, and again, just insane sights there. Now, winds are really starting to pick up here in Tampa. Just over the past couple of hours, we've been seeing gusts anywhere from 60 to 70 miles per hour. Again, we're in a shelter location, but if you kind of pan off behind me, you can really see the winds whipping in the distance. And again, we're protected, at least for the moment, as they are offshore. They're coming out of the east and east-northeast, blocking us by this building. We actually lost power about an hour ago, and we've been watching the lights kind of flicker on and off in the nearby buildings. So power definitely going out. Several thousand people without power here in Tampa Bay, likely to become much more widespread as those winds proceed. And again, curfew went into effect about an hour and 40 minutes ago here in Tampa, and the Tampa Police Department is taking this seriously. They are going to enforce this strictly. They don't want anybody out on the roads. They don't want anyone out sightseeing, even if there's a calm and breaks in between the banding. They don't want anyone out, because you never know when those gusts are going to get up to 70, 80 miles per hour, which are likely. And Steph, I want to ask you, Bradenton, all your weather, it's coming up this way. We're about 40 miles or so, about 35 miles north of you here in Tampa Bay, and all the weather that you're getting is coming up this way. Now, even though the eye may go to our east, that could mean several more inches of rain and a consistent wind. We may not get gusts as high, but we may be in the 60 to 80 mile per hour range longer than if it were to go right overhead.
Yeah, so let's talk about that, because our weather, we got out here at 5 o'clock. It's been pretty consistent this entire time. The wind coming from the north, northeast, and just a consistent wind, sorry about that, you know, gusting near 60 miles an hour. And I think that's what we'll see, because the hurricane is starting to fall apart. I mean, Chris, I'm not even calling it an eye at this point. I'm just calling it a center of circulation, because it's basically collapsed. And so I do anticipate, as we head into the evening hours, just to see this consistent wind that's going to come up towards you guys. And then if that eye wall, or what's left of the eye wall, I should say, that's where you're going to see some of those stronger winds. But, you know, we've been making the point, Chris, that you don't even have to be right near the center of circulation getting gusts on the east coast of Florida that are hurricane strength.
No, I mean, Stephanie, you're exactly right. This is the whole state of Florida storm. I mean, it's been incredible how far-reaching these gusts of over 100 miles per hour have been. You saw the pictures and the footage coming out of Miami, and they weren't even near the center of the storm. So just because you're not getting over the eye, keep in mind, now that it's making landfall, that eye will likely grow and kind of become less and less defined and become much larger. So the core of the strongest winds, although they may weaken, which will be likely, especially as it continues up the west coast of the states, the wind field will become much larger, especially of those intense 80 to 100 miles per hour. And that's what we're concerned here, especially with it being potentially a longer duration event of those very strong winds. And it's a big concern, especially here in Tampa, where we haven't been hit by a hurricane in over almost 100 years. The mayor of Tampa said himself, we've dodged this hurricane and that hurricane, but now it's our turn to deal with Irma, and boy, is she coming in with a vengeance. And back to the storm surge that we were seeing earlier in Tampa Bay, again, it's a negative impact. Right now we're seeing the water all go out. That only means there's something bad awaiting as all that water rushes in. You hear the same thing with a tsunami. This will not be anything like that, but anytime you see the water go out, there's something big that's about to happen. So you want to get as far away from the water as possible. You want to hunker down, and you want to stay safe. As exciting as it may be to get outside and sightsee, especially in between breaks, the city really doesn't want anyone to do that, nor do we want anyone to do that, especially throughout the state of Florida. And now the storm headed up to Georgia, it poses several issues as well.
So you mentioned the last time hit by a big hurricane, Tampa there. You know, we've been affected, obviously, in the 2004 season. Gene and Francis, they came across the state. But the last major hurricane to make landfall in Tampa was in 1921. That's the last time we had a major hurricane. So there's been these brush bys, but we have not had a major hurricane. And it looks like we will still not have a major hurricane making landfall here in Tampa. And that is a good thing. But we are going to get some of those strong winds. And just to give you guys an example, you know, Port St. Lucie, which is on the East Coast, just gusted to 99 miles an hour. And Chris, maybe we can talk a little bit about the difference. And we have these thunderstorms that are just racing off the water. Port St. Lucie is on the water. So you get these strong thunderstorms that are going to give you significant gusts. And a 99 mile per hour gust can obviously do some significant damage.
Yes, Stephanie, that's exactly right. I mean, 90 miles per hour. We were at the bay yesterday, and it was about 35 miles per hour, and that was kind of breezy. I mean, that's a high-end breezy day, and people were noticing palm fronds kind of, you know, littering the street, and that's only at 35 miles per hour. When you're talking 80, 90 mile per hour winds, these Category 1, Category 2, I mean, they can definitely pose a danger, especially catch you off guard. It may be a kind of a little lull, and then all of a sudden you get these 90 mile per hour winds, which can take over a tree unexpectedly and catch you off guard, and that's what's most dangerous, especially with a weakening storm. People may want to venture out a little more, and you can't do that. Even with 90, 80 mile per hour winds, it's still very dangerous.
Chris, you know, it's an interesting balance. We have these big, you know, gusts out of these thunderstorms on the east coast of Florida where we're getting tornadoes. And then where central Florida, the west coast, where we're located, it's this consistent shield of rain. Maybe they can put those winds up again because, you know, our winds here in Bradenton have been sustained around 40 miles an hour, gusting to about 60 miles an hour. And some people might think it's a lot more than that, but that's what it's been officially. And there have been gusts more. But when you get 40 mile an hour winds for hours and hours and hours, it weakens things and it shifts things. And then you get the wind direction to shift around. So there you go. I mean, look at this. Sarasota sustained at 35, gusting to 58. I'm just north of the Sarasota area where Chris is there in Tampa, sustained at 29, gusting to 49. And people might think, oh, it's got to take a lot more to take down trees. No, Chris, when you get this consistently for hours and a little gust here and there, if things are weakened, I was talking to Brian Norcross, I said, you know, do you plan on seeing roof damage with Category 1 type? He said, yeah, you know, you're going to get potentially some roof damage central and northern Florida.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly right, Stephanie. The winds, they've been gusting consistently to about 40, 50, 60 miles per hour really over the last 2 hours. So we're really getting a similar pace of weather as to what you're getting, but we all know this is far-reaching. It's the East Coast that's dealing with it as well. Now you're from Florida, just as am I, and I kind of want to ask you a question just as a Florida resident. You know, I've been through several hurricanes, Wilma, Charlie, and other tropical storms, but I've never seen the eeriness, especially in advance of the storm, that I have in this. I was driving around Tampa earlier yesterday and today, and there is nobody out, and everything on the radio is literally all Irma coverage. There's no music. It really feels otherworldly. And I guess that's a good thing because people have really heeded the warnings and advisories. It's better to be out of harm's way than to be stuck in it.
Chris, I'll say the difference. I've been at the Weather Channel 14.5 years. The difference with this storm and growing up in Florida, the difference with this storm, and I feel like all the other storms, is the size, the sheer size and strength of this. I mean, even Andrew, I was a kid in Andrew in West Palm. It went through Homestead, annihilated Homestead. What you could do is you could go down, volunteer, and then go back to your area. This now is encompassing the entire state. We've gone through the southern third of Florida, but we're not going to leave you hanging. Central and northern Florida, Georgia, and South Carolina. We're going to continue to cover this with the onshore push, the flooding, and tropical storm warnings in Atlanta, Georgia.